After the loss to Donald Trump in 2024, Democrats are lining up left and right to run for president. And no one, and I mean no one, is more desperate to be president in 2028 than Tim Walz. I used to say Gavin Newsom was the most desperate Democrat to become president. And I'm changing my mind. Tim Walz, this guy is the most desperate Democrat to be president in 2028. It seeps through, and it's a complete opposite way of coping with the 2024 loss compared with his running mate Kamala Harris in 2024. Tim Walz, this guy has had a very, very active schedule since the 2024 loss. And we're going to be going through a lot of different things, especially talking about his messaging since the election. Now, Tim Walz recently was at the California Democratic Convention where he was criticizing people like Gavin Newsom for, quote, abandoning transgender kids because of his apparent flip-flop when Gavin Newsom decided to call transgenders competing in female sports something that is truly unfair. Tim Walz was ripping into him. Even though Gavin Newsom was not there, Tim Walz still was ripping into him on this. He was in South Carolina the night before for the annual fish fry with Jim Clyburn. And Wes Moore was also there, who's another potential Democrat who will run in 2028. Now, out of all the Democrats, Tim Walz has had the most active schedule. The most active schedule. We have seen no one who has gone on a complete, almost blitzkrieg that we have seen. No one is doing it like Tim Walz is. This guy is all over the country. He's going to Republican areas where Democrats have lost ground. He's sought for multiple interviews, especially after the limited media exposure during the 2024 campaign with Kamala Harris. And he's one of the few Democrats, and I'm going to give him some credit here. He is one of the few Democrats who has looked in the mirror and said, look, we messed up. We did stuff wrong. But he's also acknowledging the fact that a lot of the decisions were not really up to him. Decisions were being made above his head. The reason he couldn't get out in front of the media more often was not because he didn't want to. It's because the Kamala Harris team really, really held him back. Now, I think we could debate a lot whether they would be better for the Democrats, it would be worse for the Democrats if Tim Walz. I really don't think it was a matter of Tim Walz doing 20 interviews or 5 interviews. I think the Democrats were going to lose either way. Biden would have had to drop out a year earlier, and Democrats would have had to put major daylight between the Biden administration and whoever was the new Democrat running in 2024. Plus, even if the Democrats picked like Josh Shapiro, who they should have, let's all be honest about something for 1 second. They picked Tim Walz, who was really a unknown governor from Minnesota, kind of a weird guy. The pick didn't really make any sense. It's like, what, did they think they were going to lose Minnesota? It's like, if I thought I was going to lose a state, I would probably be focused on Pennsylvania, not Minnesota. Because if you lose Minnesota, you probably already lost the election. But if you lose Pennsylvania, that you're really on the edge there. That's really the piece that really mattered in the election. But ultimately, what did the Democrats do? They pushed forward with Tim Walz, and to show how unprepared he was for this. Look at the debate. Look at the debate versus J.D. Vance. We talk a lot about J.D. Vance and how that debate really, really showed Republican voters, people who are maybe skeptical of J.D. Vance, who he was not their first pick, that he was the guy. He was number 2. There was no doubt after that debate that he was number 2 on that ticket, and he deserved it. J.D. Vance was prepared. He seemed comfortable. Tim Walz was the exact opposite. The guy was a basket case. Had a really, really hard time addressing positions put forward by the Biden administration and putting daylight between the two. From the Kamala Harris campaign to the Biden administration, they had a really, really tough time putting daylight between the two. And something I'll note here that I think is very, very funny, we're actually going to do a whole other video on this entire topic here. But, so, like we said, Tim Walz, he was in California at the Democrat convention. I believe it was on Saturday. Now, this is what was really, really funny about how this played out. Tim Walz was he was the main attraction here. Like, let's be honest about this. He was the main attraction at the California Democrat convention. But do you know what Kamala Harris did? Which was no different than what she did during the 2024 election, and which is really a key strategic error in the Kamala Harris campaign in 2024 was she gave a pre-recorded message. She put forward a pre-recorded message for people to listen to at this convention. This is in California, a place where she is weighing whether to run in 2026 for the governor's mansion. She gave a pre-recorded address. She really ripped on the Trump administration, the same old Democrat gripes over and over and over again. Tariffs, how they're going to, cut Medicaid. And really gave no indication whether she's leaning towards running for governor next year or for president in 2028. It's really embarrassing. Like, did you not learn anything from the 2024 election? Like, you gave 2 interviews? You gave 60 Minutes and Fox News with Bret Baier. Like, that's it. Like, how do you think this is a winning strategy? Like, I've said this many times here before. If you look at Kamala Harris, you look at her resume. Attorney General of California, Senator from California, Vice President, 2024 nominee for part of the cycle. Anyone else whose name isn't Kamala Harris, they would be the immediate front runner, leading the polls probably by 30, 40 points. But where are we at right now? Kamala Harris is leading in the polls by 10 points. There was actually just an Atlas Intel poll that came out that showed that she was actually losing to Pete Buttigieg, which, it's one poll. We're not going to put all of our trust in one poll. But still, it is a stark contrast between how Tim Walz is handling and dealing with the loss and how Kamala Harris is dealing with the loss here. Now, I am going to give Tim Walz a little bit of credit here. He did have some decent messaging, not only in the last weekend in California and South Carolina, but also he has had decent messaging since the end of the election. He wants Democrats to be tougher, to fight harder. He feels that Democrats are just kind of being complacent with what the Trump administration is doing. Maybe they're being a little vocal, but they're not really fighting against it. He wants them to be tougher. He even went on to say that Democrats weren't elected to be roadkill, which is kind of what they've been recently. But he has a lot of issues. I think there's a lot of people who do not find him authentic. They tried to play him as this, this guy who works on his truck and fishes and hunts, and it just didn't come across. I don't think that coach vibe really came across as an authentic appeal to most Americans. And if you want to talk about having broad appeal, he does not have broad appeal in the state of Minnesota. Republicans in Minnesota do not like this guy. It's in complete contrast to places which are much tougher battleground states where you have Democrats winning by even bigger margins. Tim Walz, Minnesota is a state that has not voted for a Republican since Richard Nixon in 1972. Even in Ronald Reagan's landslide win in 1984, Minnesota was the one state outside of D.C. that did not vote for Ronald Reagan. Remember that. And, okay, yes, he won by 7 points in the state. But look at this. A state that was way closer in the previous 3 elections, presidential elections, Gretchen Whitmer's winning by 10 points. You have Josh Shapiro, who won by 15 points. Yes, could you say Doug Mastriano played into the fact that margin was so high? He wasn't very popular statewide, didn't have the appeal that was needed. And you can make the same case for Tudor Dixon. But I think you can also make that same case for Scott Jensen in Minnesota. And he's winning by a smaller margin than Democrats in even in states that are highly competitive, much more competitive than Minnesota is. Let's be honest about that. So he does not have the broad appeal that is necessary to be the nominee, to win in a general election. I don't think Whitmer or Shapiro are the best candidate possible. I think they might be okay. And look, I lean a little bit to the right, so I kind of have a little bias when I look at this. But trying to look at it through my lens, I think Whitmer and Shapiro would perform much better in a general election than someone like Tim Walz was. Plus, they're not all bruised up from the 2024 election. They're not. No one wants to run the losing vice president or vice presidential nominee. Who wants to do that? And who does this guy bring into the tent? Let's be honest about this. Democrats have a big issue with really excluding certain parts of the electorate from their party. They have a big issue with it. Tim Walz does not bring anybody new. He doesn't have any special appeal with minorities. He kind of has an appeal with progressives, but then when he actually governs, he governs in a little more pragmatic way. But he doesn't really bring anybody into the tent. He's not bringing young men into the tent. He's not bringing minorities into the tent. He's not bringing black men into the tent. He's not shoring up the vote with women. Like where are you making up ground with where the Democrats lost in 2024? We know the biggest places that Democrats lost: Latinos, African American men. We saw just people of color in general, young voters, and working class voters. And I don't think he makes up any ground with any of those in a general election. And simply, look at 2024. The guy did not step up and, for the moment in 2024. Yes, could you say that he's been through it now, you've been through the ringer once, 2028 is going to be different? Okay, I'm here. I'd be all ears to hear that case. But he didn't step up in 2024. He got humiliated in 2024. So he's got a number of different things that are going for him and going against him here. Look, he's been very active. Very, very active. He's got, decent messaging, which I actually think as someone who's on the right, who's a center right, politically speaking, I think his messaging for what Democrats are looking for, this fight-in message, this tough message, I think Democrats really, really want that, and they resonate with that. That's why he's been going all around the country. Iowa, Ohio, Montana, California, South Carolina. He's been New Hampshire. He's been going all around the country, especially in places that are Republican strongholds or districts that lean to the right. But like we said, I don't think he's authentic. He doesn't have broad appeal. He doesn't really bring more people into the tent, and which Democrats desperately need to bring more people into the tent. Desperately need to do that. And but you can see how desperate Tim Walz is to be president in 2028. I think ultimately, if I were to bet on it, Tim Walz doesn't run for re-election in 2026, runs for president in 2028, drops out maybe after the New Hampshire primary, maybe after the Iowa primary. Maybe because you see him going to South Carolina with Jim Clyburn, maybe you see him start to gain some ground with African Americans, which is a key demographic that Democrats need if they want to win. Like, we've gone through different election models where if black votes across the country, if turnout among African Americans drop 10%, you would see closer margins in places like New York, places like Minnesota, like Georgia, like North Carolina, places that are going to be crucial for Democrats to win going forward. But it's very clear. This guy is desperate to be president, and I hate to break it to him. It's not going to happen. You're just not going to be president. It's not going to happen. And if the Democrats are dumb enough to nominate you in 2028, they deserve to lose. They deserve to lose. They have a terrible bench, and it should be very, very clear that Tim Walz is not the option going forward. But that's going to wrap things up for today, folks. As always, drop down below, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. And folks, we will catch you next time.